So up to now, we already know how to determine the optimal level of the K in the production process. So then how to link the optimal level of the K to the investment decisions. To do that, we want to look at that when there is no change in the K, then what does the implication for the investment decisions? Based on the law of motion, we know that if we want to keep the capital stock always the same, then we know that it turned out that the investment need to be equal the depreciated capital stock. So then if there's no change in the capital holding all the other things being equal, the investment will always be the same, that equals the delta K. But then if we want to change the K, what should we do? Well, if we want to increase the capital stock, then we need to have the investment more than the depreciated capital. So then if before the change, the investment equals the depreciated capital, then after the change, that is when we want to increase the K, then we want to have our investment greater than the depreciated capital. Therefore, the investment need to increase. On the other hand, if we want to decrease the capital, then it means that we need to have the investment less than the depreciated capital. So then we need to decrease the investment such that it is less than the depreciated capital after the change. So that is how the investment decision link to the desired level of the capital stock. So now we already know when the capital stock need to become higher, then the investment need to increase. On the contrary, if the capital stock need to be lower, then we need to decline the investment. Therefore, we want to look at three scenarios to see how does those changes affect the level of the desired capital stock, thus the investments. So now let's look at the first case, which is about a decline in the real interest rate. When the real interest rate got declined, we have the R plan that is less than R. Given that the R plan is less than R, we know that the user cost become less. And then we are going to have a new capital stock that is desired. And then given the desired capital stock level is higher than the earlier one, therefore we claim that the investment need to be increased. And let me show you why that is the case in a graph. So in here, we draw the same graph as the earlier one, that we have the vertical line representing the marginal product of the capital and the user cost of the capital. And the horizontal axis represents the capital stock. And then we have the marginal product of the capital sloping downward. And then we have a fixed user cost, which is R plus delta. So as the R gets lower, then we are going to have a new level of the user cost, which is lower than the earlier one. And then we know that before the shock, then the economy will choose the capital stock level, that is the marginal product of the capital equal to the user cost. And then they will choose the K star. And then once we have the new R, we are going to choose a new point of the K, which is higher than the earlier one. Because now as the user cost become lower, then we are going to be able to choose the capital stock with a lower marginal product of the capital. For this marginal product of the capital, the K is at the K star. So then we know the new level of the capital stock is higher than the old one. Therefore, we need to increase the investment. The second case we want to look at is what happened to the investment decision when we faces the technological advances. When we say there is technological advances, it means that the productivity now becomes higher, which implies that the marginal product of the capital is higher than before. Because of that, we are going to choose a higher level of the capital stock than before, so we will increase the investment. So now I want to tell you why that is the case. So to begin with, when we're facing the old technology, we are going to have a marginal product of the capital for the old technology. Once we have the new technology, F2K, then we are going to have a new marginal product of the capital for the new technology. So then we can have an example tell us that the new output based on the new technology will produce the goods that is X times of the number of the goods produced by the old technology. As long as the X is greater than 1, then we know that the new technology will produce more goods than the old technology. Because of that, we can also write it as the F2 as a function of the K is X times of the F1 as a function of the K. So because of that, we know the marginal product of the capital of the new technology will equal the dy2 over dk, which equals the x times of the y1 over dk. As for the marginal product of capital for the old technology is the y1 over dk, so it equals f plus k. So then we know that for the marginal product of the capital based on the new technology will then becomes x times of the marginal product of the capital of the old technology. So then now we know at the given level of the K, the marginal product of the capital now becomes higher due to the technological advances. Therefore, when we try to find the point that maximize the profit, that is setting the marginal product of the capital equal to the user cost. In the old technology, we choose the K such that the marginal product of the capital equal the user cost. But then with the new technology, at the same level of the K, we are going to have a higher marginal product of the capital. Therefore, now the marginal product of the capital becomes higher than the user cost. Therefore, we need to increase the desired level of the capital stock such that we are going to be able to find another point that the new marginal product of the capital equal to the user cost. And for this point, it will be higher than the old point. Therefore, we need to increase the investments. Now we want to look at the third scenario, that is when there is an increase in the tax rate, how will that affect the investment decisions? It turned out that when the tax rate got higher, we are going to choose a lower level of the desired capital stock level, and then we will choose to decrease the investment. To illustrate why that is the case, let's look at the graph again. We now adjust the user cost of the capital by introducing a term called the tax-adjusted user cost. And based on this concept, we are going to also find a capital stock level that is equating the marginal product of the capital to the user cost of capital after tax. Then we faces an increase in the tax rate, so the denominator 1 minus tau will become smaller. When the denominator becomes smaller, it means that the user cost after tax will become higher. Because of that, when we again want to maximize the profit, we equating the marginal product of the capital to the user cost after tax, then we are going to result in a lower level of the desired capital stock level. Because of that, the investment should fall. So let me wrap up this discussion with an example that is government tax on the output. Because of that, the firm's objective for profit maximization now becomes 1 minus tau multiplied by y minus the user cost of capital multiplied by k, and we want to maximize the profit by choosing the k. So then when we solve this problem, we are going to have d pi over dk and set it equal 0. And then we are going to have the equation that is 1 minus tau multiplied by dy over dk minus the user cost of capital d to be equal 0. And then we will be able to find the profit maximization condition that is 1 minus tau multiplied by the marginal product of the capital equal the user cost. So this equation is very similar to the earlier one, except that now we have tax on the output. So then when we are looking at the marginal product of the capital, we have a tax in front of that. And then we can rearrange the equation. We are going to find the decision rule is by setting the marginal product of the capital equal the tax-adjusted user cost. That is the user cost divided by 1 minus tau. So then when the tax rate got increased, the user cost after tax will becomes higher. Because of that, in graph, we know that the economy, when they want to maximize the profit, they need to reduce the capital stock such that the marginal product of the capital will then be higher, and then equating the user cost of capital after tax, then the profit is maximized. So in here, we complete the discussion related to changes in the tax rate, technological advances, and changes in the real interest rate, and how does those changes affect the desired capital stock level as well as the investment decisions. So this is the end of today's lecture.